Lenny, the newest 5-star bow character that has, in my opinion, one of the most unique kits in the game. For the past 20 days, I've been maining Lenny through my travels in Fontaine. I started out with him at level 1, and raised him all the way up to level 90. I used different team comps to see how Lenny works in a mono pyro team, or even reaction builds like Vaporize, Melt, and even Burgeon comps, and just compare the damage between them. Since Lenny is a new character that came out at the same time with Fontaine, I spent a majority of my last 20 days in the newest region. Although I'm not a big fan of Lenny's playstyle initially, where you just stop, charge, aim, and fire, I came to terms with it and actually started to enjoy it more and more at the end of the 20 days. To the point I even attempted to pull for his weapon, which we'll get to later in the video. Here's how I brought Lenny from 0 to hero in 20 days. On the very first day immediately after I got Lenny, I put on some Lava Walker artifact pieces, mainly for the 4-piece set bonus, which allows us to deal more damage to the enemies affected by Pyro. I know the newest artifact set is probably his best in slot, but since farming artifacts are pretty RNG dependent, I'll probably use my resins to ascend Lenny and farm his talents first before focusing on him. So I set off with my level 1 Lenny, and just fought some Hilly Jewels that I came across to test out his damage. It was probably as you expected for a level 1 character. Although we could still defeat the enemies thanks to the support of my team, once we raise Lenny up, we could probably deal more impressive damage. So throughout these 20 days, I have a few goals for my Lenny to showcase what I learned. First, I have to raise him to level 90. This should be pretty simple as there is no RNG behind this. Besides maybe getting 2 boss drops instead of 3 like what happens most of the time for me, but you get the point. My second goal is to deal 100k damage with 1 hit. This theoretically shouldn't be a problem, since Lenny's multipliers are pretty high, and with Bennett and Kazuha as supports, I should be able to achieve it after I level up Lenny's talents. My third goal is to beat the Spirall Abyss with Lenny in my team. No, I'm not gonna aim for 9 stars, but just simply clear the Abyss with Lenny being a part of my team comp. This should be easy enough, depending on whether or not I have skill issues. Finally, my fourth and final goal for this video is to learn something new about Lenny. It can be open-ended, or something I didn't know before starting my 20 days journey. And at the end of the video, we'll review all of these goals together to see if we achieve all of them. Anyways, continuing with day 1, I wandered across the newest artifact domain, and attempted it with my level 1 Lenny. I ran into a bunch of enemies that I'd never seen before, but hey, who cares? I'm just gonna bulldoze my way through. After one rotation with Kazuha and Bennett, I took care of 2 enemies before Lenny got his chance to shine. His burst did a good amount of damage as well, and his charge attack did around 14k, which is not bad for a level 1. Sadly, he got one-shotted, so the rest of my team had to finish the domain by themselves. The artifacts I got weren't that great either, so that was a letdown. Since we did his test run, I was able to ascend Lenny and level him up to level 39 before I ended my first day. On day 2, I focused on more exploration with Lenny and collecting the rainbow roses. These flowers look almost as tall as Lenny himself, so that's a pretty neat detail. Since Lenny's passive allows me to see Fontaine's specialty on my mini-map, it made it easier to find the rainbow roses in this unfamiliar territory. I also fought some mechanical robot enemies as well, and tried getting used to Lenny's playstyle in general. Since Fontaine is the newest region, I also did a lot of exploration and puzzle solving in the meantime. While collecting the rainbow roses for Lenny's ascension, I also had some trouble trying to find the fire crab boss that we needed to fight in order to ascend Lenny. I tried to find it by diving underwater, only to get ambushed by another crab and die. At this point, I wasn't familiar with any underwater mechanics, so I retreated up to the surface. Eventually, I was able to find a hole underwater that led me to the boss. For this boss fight, I brought Yelan since she's a Hydro character against a Fire Crab. At first I had no idea how to get rid of its Pyro shield since Yelan's burst isn't hitting it directly. So I kinda just brute forced my way and randomly destroyed the shield. This boss also had a lot of Pyro resistance, so Lenny was dealing lower damage than usual. After defeating this boss, we got rewarded with 3 crab claws for our efforts, so that was good. I was also able to ascend Lenny and finish the day leveling him up to level 49. On the third day, I found the other Fontaine boss and tried to fight them, but they just ignored me while I'm trying to pick a fight. I realized that I had to talk to the dude next to the boss so we could start a battle. I kinda just brute forced my way through without knowing the mechanics, and it went surprisingly well. Lenny was able to finish the boss off in the end, so he managed to defeat the boss without any casualties. Anyways, I went around Fontaine and picked up more rainbow roses. There were a few pesky Denso slimes that were waiting to ambush me, so I taught them a lesson. I made my way back to the fire crab, and at this point, I still did not know how to get rid of the crab's shield. Like, how do you even destroy the shield? I was still able to finish the fight, but this time we only got 2 claws. But that was honestly expected. Since I ran out of resins, I just called it a day and logged off. On day 4, I went to try my luck again with artifacts. Since Lenny is level 50 now, let's test out how much damage we could do. It was a bit higher now, and even though we haven't gotten a chance to level up his talents, I'm pretty impressed by his damage. After clearing the domain, I got 3 5-star artifacts, but the substats were pretty bad. I decided to try my luck at a crab boss instead. And this time, I actually figured out how to destroy the pyro shield. In order to do so, we just had to aim at its red horns. And after that, we could destroy the shield. With the shield off, we were able to do big damage against it. Okay, I was kidding about doing big damage, but the boss has pyro resistance, okay? And I also wanted to use Lenny for everything for the entirety of this challenge. I got 2 drops again. Stop giving me 2. But luckily I was able to ascend Lenny to level 60. And after leveling him up to 59, I just called it a day. On day 5, I started my day with another date with a fire crab. I brought Kokomi with me this time since she was able to destroy the shield much faster when paired with Kazuha. So the fight actually went by pretty quickly. I was able to collect the rewards and got the 3 claws. I also solved this hydro puzzle in the middle of a lake and got transported into the ocean. I quickly solved an underwater puzzle and came back out a well. Afterwards, I just went to fight a fire crab for Lenny's ascension materials, and by this point, I was pretty used to the boss's attack patterns, so it was pretty easy. Luckily, I got 3 claw drops again, so that was nice. I was able to ascend Lenny to level 70 as well, and got him up all the way to 69. I also started to level up his talents as well, and I was able to take his normal attack to level 4. So I went to farm Lenny's talent materials, and my experience with this domain is bittersweet. Although I have an easy time on this account with Lenny, on different accounts, this domain is a hit or miss for me. Luckily my team is pretty good, so they were able to support my Lenny, and I was able to complete my runs pretty smoothly. I did a good amount of runs, and was able to get Lenny's talents all the way up to level 6 on his normal attack. I started off day 6 with my daily crab beating. Since Lenny's talents were leveled up the day prior, I was able to beat up the boss in record time, and even dealt around 20k damage to it with the boss's pyro resistance. Next, I went around hunting for some fatui enemies, because Lenny requires their drops for his talents. The enemies and monster stats were pretty weak, so Lenny was able to finish them all off pretty easily. My burst was pretty strong as well, dealing around 40k to enemies without any buffs at all. Even the enemies in New were a bit weak, and Kazuha was able to just solo them without me even getting a chance to use my Lenny. With a fully buffed Lenny, I was able to deal 40k damage on my initial charge shot against enemies affected by pyro. The one thing I like about Lenny's playstyle that kind of differs from Ganyu is that he doesn't really care about his reaction damage. So I can just charge attack aimlessly without caring about applying cryo or hydro. But later on, I'll definitely try out some melt and vaporize damage for Lenny as well, to see how it fares with his mono pyro team. To cap off our first week, I fought a giant crab to gather some more essential material for Lenny. After that, I went to collect some rainbow roses as well, since the majority of them respawned in my world. I went around Fontaine and just cleared out every enemy I came across, and collected some chests. It was pretty fun just to run around and shoot things, and just enjoying the new Fontaine region was definitely something I came to fall back in love with in Genshin. Since Fontaine is still new, I was able to solve some puzzles as well, and was able to farm a bunch of chests. With 7 days of experience under my belt, I have to say, although I don't really like Gangyu's charge attack playstyle, I actually enjoyed Lenny's. I'm not sure if it's because Lenny's grim Malkin cat that's making a difference in his playstyle, or was it because of his explosive burst that just does a tons of damage in general, but something about being able to self-heal might have played a part of my enjoyment to his gameplay over Gangyu. But hey, maybe I'll give Gangyu a try as well when I do her Zero to Hero series. On day 8, I was able to finally ascend Lenny after converting a few materials. So I leveled him up to 79, and also converted a few talent materials to level up his normal attack to level 8. Afterwards, I wanted to test out my damage against the purple balls in Fontaine. My burst was able to deal 80k damage, and my punch attack dealt 24k physical damage. So I'm not very good with numbers, but that's actually very good, right? Even though I haven't done 100k in one hit yet, we're getting closer and closer. My normal attacks were doing around 40k without any buffs, so it was pretty good progress for 8 days. So on day 9, I finally got a chance to do the Fontaine reputation bounties. This was a pretty good chance to further test out my damage as well. Things didn't go exactly as planned, since I literally got comboed on, so that was a bit rough. We also had to fight the purple ball again, and with a pretty standard Lenny rotation, I was able to take it down without much trouble. After that, I basically just cleaned up the rest of the enemies for the bounty rewards. After we finished bounties, I came across this Hydro Spirit boss near the edge of the map, and engaged in combat with it. Well, it's safe to say, things didn't exactly go as planned, and after that I retreated. Against the easier Hydro Eidolons, it was a piece of cake. I didn't really switch builds, so my vaporized damage was doing a bit less than my mono pyro. On day 10, I decided to craft some prototype amber weapons, mainly for refinements. I was able to get it to R5, so now my tank fade build is complete. Since Lenny is a bold character, it's sure to be pretty valuable. And since I have Yanfei at C6, I thought, why not build a tank Fei? I know Toma and Xian also generate shields, but since Yanfei is a catalyst, she can also use prototype Amber to heal as well, making her both a shielder and a healer. So since my Lenny has a shield now, I feel pretty safe already. At this point, I'm still bringing 4 pyro characters for Lenny, but you'll see the reason why later. I spent the rest of day 10 just exploring more of Fontaine, and at this point, I think I'm pretty experienced with Lenny's playstyle in general. I started off day 11 farming for some talent materials. Now that Lenny is mostly built at level 80, I was able to test out his raw damage with and without buffs against the purple boss in this domain. He's probably able to solo this whole domain by himself thanks to his self heals, but I took advantage of everyone on my team to comfortably clear this domain. On the second run, I tried standing on Bennett's circle to test out his charge attack damage, but I kept on getting staggered by the enemy instead. His burst attack under Bennett's buff was pretty good, around 77k, but hopefully after I level up his talents more, I'll be able to hit 100k. On the other hand, his charge attacks were doing pretty good damage, especially with all of his buffs. After the artifact farming, I just spent the rest of the day exploring Fontaine and casually hunted for some more materials for Lynette. On the next day, I continued my terror in Fontaine. I killed a bunch of mecha enemies, crabs that were hanging out next to the beach, and even treasure hoarders. I came across this Helicho on an island and decided to unleash everything I got, but I came up just short of 100k. With that said, I'm still pretty impressed with my damage so far in general, since I wasn't used to charge attacks hitting that hard. I leveled up Lenny's burst to level 7 for a bit more damage, and immediately went to test out his damage. With Bennett's buff, I was able to deal a record high 94k on an enemy, and it was enough to one-shot them, so we're so close to hitting one of our goals. I also came across a few dogs in the cave, and you know what they say, cats beat dogs, because my Grim Malkin cat defeated all of the enemies in this cave. There was also this consecrated beast that we encountered in Fontaine. Since it was pyro, I assumed it had pyro resistance, but it still didn't stand a chance. With 12 days now under my belt, I haven't really completed any goals that I've set upon myself for Lenny, but we're getting closer and closer to achieving them. I started day 13 off by fighting the fire crab since we still had to raise Lenny up to level 90. I got rid of its shield pretty quickly with Kokomi, and just bursted it down with Lenny and Xiangling. Unfortunately, I only got 2 claw drops, so I went to take my anger out against the mecha enemies. Now, I don't know exactly what changed here, but after buffing myself up and bursting with Lenny, this happened. Yup, I was finally able to achieve the goal of hitting 100k with 1 attack. So that was pretty satisfying and completely made up for the fact that I only got 2 boss drops earlier. Although I do still need to get Lenny's level up to level 90. Since Lenny's charge attack does pretty good damage, I also took advantage of this by practicing my aim in Genshin. I just headed to the beach and I used the treasure hoarders as targets to practice my aim. And that was pretty fun. Before I ended the day, I went back to fight the fire crab to get my revenge on it. It didn't really take that long before the boss sat back down with me emerging as a victor. So to celebrate, I just used Lenny's skill and healed up. I got rewarded with 2 more claws, so we're slowly inching our way to a level 90 Lenny. Starting off on day 14, I did the event missions where we had to fight the enemies in Fontaine. One thing I really like about this event is that these event enemies actually drop their respective materials after defeating them. Over the past 2 weeks of maining Lenny, I got a good grasp of his playstyle and how to position him without relying on shields. Since he's a bow character, he is prone to a lot of danger. Luckily, by now, I fought hundreds of mecha enemies, so I know all of their attack patterns by heart now. So they weren't really that difficult to dodge. By staying a safe distance, we could just snipe them down one by one and defeat all of the opponents here. Since we still needed ascension materials, I went back to fight the crab again, and quickly finished it off. Next, I went to Inazuma to just hunt down some enemies. I used Nahida for a burning team, and the damage was pretty decent. The burning helps Lenny as well, and since the enemies were constantly burning, Lenny's passive worked out nicely. As a bow character, Lenny has a pretty easy time against the Spectre enemies as well. With his burst, he can also run into them, and he was able to one-hit KO them as well. My favorite combo for Lenny is definitely using his burst first, and immediately using his skill afterwards, because it does a good amount of damage. Lenny's burst definitely makes him a bit mobile, so it contrasts his charge attack playstyle pretty well, and doesn't make his gameplay feel slow. To cap off the day, I fought a crab again, and was able to defeat it in under a minute, but sadly I only got 2 drops this time. Oh, and welcome. On day 15, I was able to finally ascend my Lenny to level 90. I did a challenge on my Twitch stream, and I ultimately got rewarded with Lenny's weapon for it. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to level up the weapon in time, since I didn't pre-farm the materials for his weapon. But over the past 2 weeks of maining Lenny, I enjoyed his playstyle so much that I opted to go for his weapon as well. Anyways, I also used a team that consists of both Lynette and Lenny since this team was recommended to me as well. My Lynette wasn't really leveled up yet, but I put them together in a team anyways. Since Lenny is level 90 now, I went to fight the 4 Ruin Guards in Liyue, After doing his burst combo, the 3 closest rune guards dropped immediately, and I just sniped the last one to death. For day 16, I just tried out some reaction team comps for Lenny since some people were interested to see how much damage it does compared to his normal mono pyro team. I started out with a Layla team, but it was a bit difficult to test out since Layla's cryo applications were a bit slow and awkward for Lenny's playstyle. So after that, I decided to switch to Senha for her quick cryo application and also some charge attack buffs. From doing some quick damage tests, it turned out pretty similar to his mono pyro team. With the 4-piece Crimson artifacts however, I started to see some big changes. Vaporized was strong enough to one-shot the crabs near the beach, and against enemies that were already infused with Hydro, his burst shattered a record high damage for me. The Vaporized elemental skill was doing pretty good damage without any buffs as well, so I'm pretty impressed. However, even though Vaporized seemed pretty good, keep in mind that I have been using Lava Walker pieces for mono pyro Lenny, and not his best installed artifacts, so that might change after I get my hands on them in the future. Mono pyro is definitely still easier because you don't have to worry about reactions, and the damage is consistent across everyone. On day 17, I tested out a Burgeon team with Lenny. I basically stacked Elemental Mastery on it, and used a pretty standard Burgeon team. I even went to fight Vivienne of the Lake with it, and it was a lot of fun. Although Burgeon isn't the best for Lenny, I think it's pretty interesting, and more importantly, it was fun. I was even able to defeat a boss at the end with it, so it works. Even though Lenny's playstyle doesn't really fit Burgeon that well, his bursts and skill can proc the Dendral Course on command, so it worked out well in the end. So after trying most of the team comps recommended to me, I went to the Mono Pyro team plus Lynette for my Lenny team. For day 18, I basically used this time to do some last minute training before I tackle the Spirall Abyss. Using everything I learned from maining Lenny, I just went around Fontaine and cleared out any enemies that I came across. I gotta say though, Lynette definitely complements Lenny well, and her kit was definitely made with Lenny in mind, since you can swirl pyro and even other elements for him. With our much needed preparation and training, we're definitely ready to challenge the Abyss and complete our next goal. On day 19, I went to challenge the Abyss. I mainly just went to floor 12 since I already cleared the other floors, so I could probably clear the other floors without any trouble. Anyways, in the first chamber, there were a lot of mini Dorito enemies. With Kazuha, we could just group them together, and we quickly took care of the first wave of enemies. Next, there were a bunch of Bishops, and I was able to do 130k with my burst against them, and finish them off with my elemental skill. The last 3 enemies were a mix of Flying Helichurls and Sparky. I just used Lenny's burst to run the enemies over, and finish off the last Helichurl with charge attacks, which dealt a surprisingly good amount of damage. The next chamber had Giant Dorito boss, and with a fully buffed up Lenny, I was able to do 150k with my burst. This boss hides a lot, and wastes a lot of time in general without using a Hyper Boom team, so I unfortunately lost a lot of time here. No! In the final chamber, we had to defeat the twin boss bishops at the same time. Even though Lenny is more of a single target DPS, his burst and skills made up for it. Coupled with Kazuha and Xiangling, AoE wasn't really a problem for us, so we were able to keep up with consistent damage between both of the bosses. Although I kinda wasted my burst, and my Kazuha died. Where'd they go? Okay. I still managed to dish out a decent amount of damage. Thankfully, we were still able to complete the final chamber and clear the Abyss. On the final day, I used up everything that I learned and recruited some people off my Twitch streams to do a Lenny boss rush. We started off with the ballerina bosses in Fontaine, and all of our Lennys were able to finish the boss without much trouble. Next, we had to fight a Geo Hypostasis boss. What? I got slapped. The boss was pretty easy though since it's a Liyue boss. We had trouble destroying the pillar since all of us were bro characters. The third boss we had to fight was a PMA, which was decently challenging. Since we were all Lennys, we could just stay a distance and slowly chip away at the boss's health. Yeah, I have 100 hours with Lenny, so I'm pretty sure I'm not gonna die at all. Well, hopefully I can stay true to my words. Anyways, PMA wasn't really that hard, so we defeated it without any casualties. Next up was Magu Kenki. Magu Kenki, I don't think I'll die because we have a bait and it's pretty easy. I haven't died yet, by the way. And Lenny can self-heal, so unless you just get comboed on, I don't think it's possible to die. This boss is scarier when you're close distance. Otherwise, it's pretty easy. See? Very calculated attacks. Finally, I finished the boss off with my burst. We circled back to Fontaine again and fought the second boss this time. The fight was a bit different, but since we were all using Lennys, we just stayed a good distance from the boss. He puts out his shield. Ow! I got slapped. It got a bit too close for comfort for my Deathless run. Ow! I dead. I don't want to die. but we managed to pull through in the end. The past 20 days maining Lenny has definitely been an interesting experience. I went from not really interested in Lenny at first, but after everything that we've been through, I definitely enjoyed this experience. Now let's go over my initial goals for Lenny and see if we accomplished everything. The first goal was pretty easy. We did raise Lenny up to level 90, so that's mission accomplished. I was also able to deal 150k damage as well with one burst, so we also completed our second goal. Our third goal was to clear the Spirall Abyss. Although I didn't get the full 9 stars on floor 12, I still managed to complete floor 12, so I consider that a win. The final goal was to learn something that I didn't know about Lenny, and I can think of 3 already. The first one is pretty stupid, but in the early days of me maining Lenny, I thought he needed to have a full team of 4 pyro characters in order to get all of his damage bonus. But it turns out that you only needed 2 other pyro characters, not including Lenny himself. The second thing I learned was that you could cancel his burst by clicking on the elemental skill button, so you could do an instant explosion. This was also something I didn't know about in the beginning. So throughout the past 20 days, I definitely got more and more used to Lenny's kits. The final Lenny tip that I also learned was that he can also self-heal after he accumulated his stacks with his charge attacks. I don't know why, but I really like DPS characters that can self-heal. I might have missed something, so if you know something that I don't, feel free to comment down below and give me your best Lenny tips as well. I'm actually excited to start farming for the new artifacts, and maybe with his new signature weapon, I can do even more damage in the future. Lenny is definitely a character I could see myself continuing to play even after this video, unlike Child who's still sitting at level 1. But hey, maybe I'll raise Child from 0 to hero next. If you want to see a Child video, make sure to subscribe and like the video since that's the best way to tell me that you like this video. And if you made it this far and want to see Child's 0 to hero, make sure to comment release Child from jail down in the comments below, and I only do Child's video if I see 100 or more comments saying it, so get busy.